Josh at Vergara. What's going on, everybody? We're taking a look at the Oppo Reno 2Z, which is one of the first phones to come out with the Helio P90 by Mediatek, especially out in India. Speaking of which, I want to give a quick shout out to Mediatek. Thank you so much to Mediatek for sponsoring this particular video. I'm out with some friends here in San Diego checking out the phone, and a lot of what you're going to see in this video is from the cameras of the Oppo Reno 2Z. So let's go ahead and get started here. But before we get started with the cameras and I give you some of my thoughts on the phone, why don't I show you the unboxing experience, and then I'll get into some of the differences between the Oppo Reno 2Z and the original Oppo Reno 2, which I also have, and there's some key differences between those two phones. Alright, now that the phone is out of its box, let's give some first impressions on the design. The Reno 2Z is one of 3 variants that are all released in India, but it still carries on some of the traditions from the Oppo Reno and the Reno 10x zoom. The main thing that you'll notice is that the pop-up camera is no longer that shark fin. That's something that was reserved for the Oppo Reno 2. Instead, you get a pop-up camera that's right in the middle, and it does actually glow a little bit as it is moving, which is a nice touch. Speaking of a nice touch, you do get that small nub on the back still. However, it does not fall where your index finger would normally land on the back of the phone, like with the Oppo Reno 10x zoom. Instead, it's higher up on the phone, and that's actually okay because the whole purpose of this nub is to make sure that the glass over the 4 cameras on the back does not scratch on whatever surface you have the phone lying on. And really, you can't deny just how good this particular backing is. There's this little shine that goes around that middle portion where it says Oppo designed for Reno, and it's a lovely pattern. When the light hits this particular phone just right, that part shines a bit more than the rest. It's such a nice look. But of course, it's all about that quad camera setup, and the Oppo Reno 2Z does sport the 48 megapixel Sony IMX sensor that we've seen in a lot of different phones, and honestly, it's been doing a pretty good job across the board. After that, you do get an 8 megapixel wide-angle camera, which you know I'm going to end up using a lot today, a 2 megapixel monochrome lens, and a 2 megapixel portrait lens that is used for depth information. Now that I've mentioned the cameras, let's go ahead and pop it over to the cameras of the Oppo Reno 2Z, and I have to warn you, spoiler alert, there's a lot of food in this video. Now, I did not realize that when I unboxed this phone, this was going to be a big foodie day, but that's basically what you're about to see. Gotta appreciate the fact that the front-facing camera is actually a little bit wide. I can actually fit enough stuff in the frame to be able to vlog with this, but there's not much stabilization on the front camera, so I prefer to just stay in one spot rather than walking so you don't get all those jitters. But speaking of stabilization, the video on the rear camera, especially from the main 48 megapixel sensor, is actually pretty good. Throughout that first portion of the day, I saw no stutters, no lags on this phone. I felt no slowness from this particular variant of the Oppo Reno 2. As a matter of fact, the Oppo Reno 2Z does have the Mediatek Helio P90, which is a high-performance processor that you may or may not see a whole lot in the market, but this is the first one that's coming out in India, and it's doing a great job so far. More on that performance in a little bit. We can go ahead and get a couple of the other specifications out of the way. There's a 4000 mAh battery, but VOOC 3.0 flash charging is all here, including that charger in the box. And as far as current trends are concerned, you do get an in-display fingerprint sensor, one that actually works pretty well, and you can put a few different animations on it so you can get a nice little flare as you're unlocking your phone. For most of the day, I did end up putting that nice case onto the phone, and honestly, I think that it adds a little bit more grip to the phone as it is a glossy back, a glossy glass back that can slip about a little bit, and also it gets really smudged up, which is pretty common for phones like this. The screen is a 6.5-inch AMOLED panel at 1080p resolution. And because of that size of the screen, which you do get all screen here because the camera is in that pop-up instead of in a notch, the phone does have a decent footprint. It's not uncomfortable in one hand, and I did find myself easily maneuvering around it throughout this day. However, having the case on there did add a little bit more grip, and it does help that the case included in the box looks pretty good too. As far as general usage of the phone is concerned, everything is working just fine. I even got a little bit of gaming done, and I'll show you some of that a little bit later. But just getting through all different applications, having everything installed, even doing some social media has not been a problem whatsoever. And honestly, the experience on here is not all that different from the Oppo Reno 2, and even then, the Oppo Reno from before it. If you remember, I was a big fan of the Oppo Reno, and the fact that you get a version of it with a Mediatek processor and the experience is still about the same. Indeed, the Helio P90 was doing a great job throughout the day, and I was connecting to as many Wi-Fi connections as I could. That way I could do certain things like play PUBG Mobile on here, which is exactly what I did at the brewery near the end of the day. I had a perfect time with it, really no complaints whatsoever, so I'm expecting that the Mediatek processor on here is going to do just fine for daily usage. And on top of that, daily usage is covered by ColorOS 6.1. It really sprawls across this entire AMOLED panel really well, and there are some features on here that you could end up using to really customize your daily experience in a unique way. Personally, I opted for full screen gesture, something that I'm becoming more and more used to, and ColorOS is one of the main operating systems that uses it. So swiping up from the bottom and getting to the recent app screen and going in between all of the different applications really did not show any slowness whatsoever. And when it comes to gaming, you can get that extra oomph out of this phone. You have the game space where you can launch games, and then you have options to turn off certain notifications and also to boost the performance a little bit, especially by turning off any applications running in the background. Which brings me to some final thoughts on mainly the camera package. Now, the front-facing camera is just wide enough in order to get yourself and other people in the frame, which is nice. On the back, you do still get the main sensor, the 48 megapixel sensor that provides some really good photos, and you get a night mode that is able to be used across all of the different lenses and all the different zoom levels. And thanks to the processing of the Helio P90, night shots actually provide a lot of detail where there was none before because of very dark situations. As far as video recording is concerned, you've seen it throughout this video. I have enjoyed using this as a video camera, especially because there's some really good stabilization being put onto the main sensor. All in all, my first day with the Oppo Reno 2Z has been enjoyable, and I can see why this phone is going to be a pretty big deal, especially out in India where the Oppo Reno 2 line was recently launched. This particular model of the phone, the Reno 2Z, is available for just under 30,000 rupees. Once again, thanks to Mediatek for not only providing the Oppo Reno 2Z for me to try out. It's really nice to try a phone from India for once. There are so many of them out there, and this one is pretty unique in my whole queue of phones right now. But shouts out to them. Thank you so much for this particular device and also for sponsoring this video. Let me know what you think about the Oppo Reno 2 line. The 2Z in particular is the one that we talked about in this video. So get into the comment sections down below and let me know what you think across the board. Let us have that discussion down there, and then drop some likes on my videos if you haven't already. Also, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And from there, I'm going to go ahead and call it on this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will just remind you to enjoy your tea, everybody.